Welcome to Demo B1. So I've already gone ahead and solved everything in this demo. So we're just going to walk through my solutions. These solutions are posted, so you can get access to the PDF of the blank, as well as the solutions, which is the PDF file we're walking through here. So if you just want the PDF version, that's available to you, and you don't need to disrupt your eardrums listening to my voice. Okay, so demos, as always, are similar to what you can expect on a mini exam. What you're seeing here is actually taken directly from work I've assigned students in past semesters. So let's just get started. Glad you're here. So question 1, preferences for butterbeer are represented by this little thing here. So we have the positive intercept, and then we have a negative relationship between quantity and price, which simply captures the demand curve, as we've talked about. So we're asked here to use a graph to plot this demand curve and then talk about quantity demanded at two different prices. And then once we're done with that, we find and label consumer surplus at both of these prices. So on the vertical axis, the first thing to do is just identify where the vertical intercept is. And this is going to be important when we come back to consumer surplus. We could find the horizontal intercept for the demand curve as well, but for our purposes, we don't actually really need it. Okay, so we have our two prices, 50 and 40. The first thing to do is to find the quantity demanded for both of these. So I've written these using two colors. So for a price of 50, all we do is plug in 50 in for our price. We have 50 is equal to 100 minus 1/2 QD. We just simplify this, and that gives us a quantity of 100. A quantity demanded of 100. And then we can do the same set of steps for quantity demanded at a price of 40. And we get a higher quantity, simply capturing the positive relationship between, the negative relationship between prices and quantities given to us by the law of demand. And then again, we just, for consumer surplus, all we have to do is find the area above the price line, so the surplus from all of the exchanges from whichever quantity we're looking at. So we start with a price of 50. We have a quantity of 100. 100 units are exchanged. Or, in theory, we don't have sellers yet, but assuming all of these are exchanged, we have a quantity demanded of 100. So we look at all of those individual quantities, and then we look at the difference between what the buyers are paying, which is 50, and what they're willing to pay, which is the demand curve, or the marginal benefit curve. And then we simply look at this whole region, the whole region captured above the price, below the demand curve, and inside the quantity. So that gives us a triangle in this case. It's not always going to be a triangle, but it is here. Okay, and then we just, plug in the height, which is 100 minus 50 times the base, which is 100, multiplied by 1/2, so we just plug those numbers into the equation for a triangle and simplify. And then we do the same thing for consumer surplus at 40. I've labeled these as different areas in green and red, but you could just label these, and we'll do this in Demo B2, you could just label it as two separate but overlapping triangles. Okay, and when we solve that out, we get 3,600. And then there's a handy box entry here for those two values. All right, and you can see consumer surplus goes up when we decrease price, both because we have a larger quantity and because prices are lower, so buyers are happier. Okay, and then for question 2, we do a similar thing, but for producers. So we look at the two prices, we have a supply curve satisfies the law of the law of supply, positive relationship between prices and quantities, and we look at those two prices. We solve for quantity demanded simply by plugging in the price that we're interested in into the supply curve, and then we simplify and solve. So we get a quantity supplied of 45. At this price, at a price of 40, we find the area above the supply curve, below the price, and inside the quantity demanded. And that gives us the seller's producer surplus. So the value, the additional value generated for them from these exchanges, if they're exchanging, above the costs of production. So we've talked a bit about how sellers' supply curve comes from their willingness to sell, which is simply a function of their marginal cost, how much it costs them to produce that unit, that very specific unit. Okay, so that gives us the producer surplus at a price of 40, and then we just follow the same steps. We plug in a price of 50 into the supply curve when we're finding the quantity supplied at a price of 50, and then we use all the numbers that we've established to then find the area of this larger triangle, which is the area under the price of 50, above the supply curve, and inside the quantity supplied of 60 here. Okay, and then once we do that, we get a producer surplus of 1,200. All right, and then for question 3, you can solve for total surplus if you'd like. I crossed it out here. It's a lot to ask in one question, but it's totally doable. I just didn't do it here. So the main purpose of this question is to establish equilibrium price and quantity. So we want to find those two using some algebra and a bit of graphing. So to do this, we just intersect supply and demand at this point. This is the one point where we get what we call market clearing, where quantity supplied is equal to quantity demanded. So we plug that price in to both the supply curve and the demand curve, and that gives us the same quantity. So buyers and sellers are buying and selling exactly the same quantity at this price, which means every buyer who walks into the market looking for something to buy at this price is able to find what they're looking for, and every seller who brings their goods to market at this, expecting this price, is able to sell everything they brought. So that's what we call market clearing, and that's what allows us to find Q star. We set supply equal to demand, we set the two prices equal to each other, and find, we set quantity demanded equal to quantity supplied, and then we just go through and solve algebraically for the rest. And feel free to work through these steps at your own speed. The rest of this is really just algebra, but it's easy to get tripped up on this sometimes. So make sure you're all on board with these steps here. What this does, setting prices equal to each other and quantities equal to each other, quantity supplied equal to quantity demanded, we're really just, notationally, we're just dropping the subscripts, quantity supplied and quantity demanded, and then setting them equal to each other. So that was the sort of second line here. We're setting quantities equal to each other. This gives us a quantity in equilibrium, our equilibrium quantity, which we denote with a Q star. And then once we have that quantity, we can just plug it into either the supply curve or the demand curve. It turns out it doesn't matter which one we're dealing with. We plug this quantity into either one, either the supply curve or the demand curve, and it tells us the same price, sort of by construction. We've constructed it to be this way. And once we do that, then we find the price. So we just enter these in the box here. Okay, so that's question 3, finding equilibrium. And if you wanted to go ahead and find total surplus, you would just calculate the area of this triangle, both consumer surplus and producer surplus. So it would be this larger triangle here. Okay. And, we've already established that at this price, neither buyer nor seller has an incentive to raise or lower their prices. All right. So question 4, turns out butterbeer is culturally associated with a good time. People seem to enjoy it. This all changed when a high-profile wizard went viral slamming the taste. So, we have like influencer culture going on in the wizarding world. And at the same time, we get sort of a difficulty getting access to butter extract, which is an important component in making butterbeer. So we're asked to use a graph to discuss the effect these two events had on the butterbeer market. So the first thing is an influencer slamming the taste. Essentially, that's going to reduce the demand for butterbeer. We take our cues from the people we talk to and see. So this is going to change. It's going to shift this the demand curve in after the slamming the taste by the viral wizard. So we get the shift in the demand curve, and we'll hold off on evaluating the market until both of these effects are taking place. The second one is that when an ingredient becomes more expensive or more difficult to acquire, this raises the cost of production. It makes it harder to make butterbeer. And so what happens in this case is we get a shift in or a shift up of the demand of the supply curve. At any quantity, it's now more costly for the seller to make it. So we just draw a horizontal line from any quantity, and it hits the new supply curve at a higher price than the old one. So we get a shift in or a shift up in the supply curve. Okay, so we label both of those shifts, and then we write a little sentence about it on the side here. And then part of this question is to use a graph to discuss how these events impacted the market. So our original equilibrium was at this point, and our new equilibrium is at the intersection of supply, our new supply and our new demand at this point. So we know both of these forces move quantity down. When demand shifts in, that lowers prices and lowers quantities. So we go to this point. And when supply shifts in or up, that also shifts the quantity down, but it shifts the price up. So we get these similar directions in the quantity, so both shift down, but we get these offsetting or opposite directional changes in prices. When we shift the demand curve in, prices go down, and when we shift the supply curve up, the price goes up. So we know quantities are going to be lower, but we don't know whether prices have gone up or gone down, because we don't know the size. We're not told anything about the size of these shifts. So we can't determine whether prices are larger or smaller than they were before. We certainly know that quantities are smaller, but prices are what we call indeterminate. There are competing forces, and without knowing the relative size of the shifts, we don't know whether prices have gone up or gone down. Okay, so let's we're given some space to sort of answer these questions. Demand is shifted down, supply shifted up. This is a shift up in the supply curve. Prices are indeterminate, just like we talked about. There are competing forces. And quantity has gone down because the two forces, shifting supply and demand, move quantities in the same direction. Okay, that's it. Feel free to email me if you have questions.